fans, Black Friday has come early this year, and we're ripping up our prices for a limited time only. Get the heaviest hitting deal of the year. Save up to 33% on all plans and stack up your fight calendar with over 150 fights a year. Live on DAZN.
What a fight we have here in our main event.
And then enjoy a knockout November schedule. Subscribe before November 29th. Sign up at DAZN.com/boxing.
All right, people. Midweek report time. So, a lot to get into, a lot to preview, a lot of announcements with regards to cards coming up this week. I'm not going to talk about it, by the way, just in case, because I'm going to start with something that people don't want to really hear about. And I'm going to talk about it for the simple reason that I really just can't wrap my head around why anyone would want to see this. And there's a lot of people previewing and talking about, certainly on X, you're seeing a lot of it. The Mike Tyson Jake Paul fight, which is happening in Sunday fortnight, I think 15th thereabouts. You know, this meant to happen in July, and I was glad it got binned. Now it might still get binned, you never know, but Mike Tyson is pushing 60 years old, if he's not already 60. I just can't understand how anyone would want to watch this fight. You know, I remember, and I guess it's the aura that Mike Tyson still has, because I remember when he came back, but when he had that exhibition with Roy Jones, and months beforehand he had that exhibition, he was on the pads. You could see he took like 6 seconds of clips, and you know, looked explosive, but you could tell he was really forcing that work. And it's again, you're talking about probably 6 seconds of a clip. You know, if you could take a complete novice and get him to hit the bag, if you can just angle it right, if you can get a little snippet, you can make a novice who's never hit a heavy bag in his life look like, oh God, he's got some technique there. And no sooner did that happen, you had people who were like, oh, I want to see Mike Tyson back. I want to see him in there against the likes of Deontay Wilder, you know, Tyson. He could still beat these guys. It's like, mate, he fought Kevin McBride nearly 20 years ago. I think he was in his late 30s. He would have been probably in his late 30s thereabouts at the time. Late 30s, yeah, it would have been roughly that. I think he was 66 is when Tyson was born, so he would have been probably about 38, 39, thereabouts. Kevin McBride, even going into that fight, had problems with alcohol, and that was documented, and you know, he had more problems thereafter. Kevin McBride was never that good. He would be a complete journeyman in this era of heavyweights. He beat Mike Tyson. Mike Tyson quit in that fight, and he looked terrible in it. Now, 15 years later in 2020, what makes you think he's going to be anybody going to be worse? And vice versa now. I just don't know why anyone wants to watch this fight. I really, truly don't. It just seems, I don't know. I just don't know. I really don't know. But that's that. Daniel Dubois, now this is an interesting one, because he is the man on the top of a lot of people's lists now, because Alexander Usyk and Tyson Fury have their fight coming up in December. They're locked in, and I think the majority of boxers, you don't really hear a great deal mention the winner of Fury Usyk. You don't really hear, because I think that most neutral observers, even fighters, kind of look at that fight and think likelihood is if Usyk wins, he's going to bow out. If Tyson wins, you know, would he stay? Would he go? What's he going to do? I think you're looking at both guys and thinking, if it's not their last fight, it may be their second to last fight. You know, sort of right. Whereas Dubois, 26 years old, and he's got no mandatories. He's welcomed the voluntaries. I know Joseph Parker has mentioned Daniel Dubois, or certainly Andy Lee, his trainer, has mentioned Daniel Dubois, saying that they will be ready for February. It's unlikely that we're going to see him in the ring in December. You know, I think that card is locked in. I would be surprised if there's any changes to it, to be honest with you. But with Dubois, February 22nd, I believe, is the date they're talking about this next Riyadh season show, and apparently it's going to be a massive one. Like, and I mean a massive one, apparently, anyway. And you would imagine Dubois, if he's not headliner, he's going to be featured quite high on the card. And I think after his last performance, I'd say if he's not headlining, I'll be pretty surprised. But they're not going to give him you would imagine, soft touches of voluntary. You would imagine anyway, especially if it's a Riyadh season show. So Joseph Parker If ever a man has deserved a crack at the world title, it's Joseph Parker. But Dubois on TalkSport has welcomed the potential fight with Fabio Wardley. Whoever I gotta destroy, I'll do it. I'm on form now. My confidence is right up there. I'm feeling on top of the world. So whoever I gotta destroy and take out of their misery, I'll do it. This comes off the back of Sky reporting that he was given the all clear to fight Fabio Wardley. And Fabio Wardley as an opponent for Daniel Dubois, it makes a lot of sense from a promotional point of view. Fabio Wardley's impressed on a couple of Saudi shows. Daniel Dubois is impressed on some Saudi shows. They're both promoted by Queensberry. Wardley is in the top 15. He's a very entertaining fighter. You look at those styles and you just think, oh my God, that. And you look at like the Joshua fight and you thought that had knockout written all over it. This is another one that has knockout written all over it. I think that both fights I'd make Daniel Dubois favourite, whether it was against Wardley or whether it was against Joseph Parker. The only thing I would say about Joseph Parker, I think that'd be potentially a trickier fight because Parker can be negative. He can move a little bit. He can maybe look to survive. That's the wrong way because Parker would come to win, but it could go long. It might not be the most entertaining until it gets entertaining, if you know what I mean. Whereas Wardley versus Dubois first round, you could see both guys just going hammer and tongue. I think that is a fantastic fight. And I wouldn't be surprised if Turki Al-Sheikh is looking at that and thinking, yes, that's the fight to make now. Because in reality, when you think about it, Fabio Wardley, he wants to make the transition into world level. Obviously, he's beaten Fraser Clark now. He's beaten the likes of David Alai, who I'm going to talk about now in a minute. And you want to see him at world level. I do think there is still limitations there with Fabio Wardley. Definitely, I've always felt that. Although he's certainly over the years has improved, and he certainly has. But I do still think there is some limitations there with Fabio Wardley. And against someone like a Daniel Dubois, I mean, Anthony Joshua got aggressive with Daniel Dubois. You saw what happened to Anthony Joshua. And that's an experienced, a very well experienced, old, I say old, but you know what I mean, in terms of boxing years, Anthony Joshua, who should have known better. You're talking, and again, experienced, Olympian, everything. Fabio Wardley, white collar. So and that would be interesting. That would be a really, really good fight. I love it. I absolutely love the fight. I think it will be epic. I think it'd be an epic fight. Frank Warren has actually recently announced that he'll be doing another Magnificent Seven. And these Magnificent Seven shows by Frank Warren are absolutely fantastic. They really are. They really are. This is the first one he's going to be doing in London. I'm just, when it comes to events, getting to events, they just can't fall on worse days. Because this one's going to be in the Wembley Arena. Now, the Wembley Arena is it's quite a bit away from me. I live in Stratford. That's about 20 odd stops on the Jubilee line to the Wembley Arena. And the problem is, I'll actually be home in Dublin that weekend. I'll be going home to Dublin that Wednesday. So I'll have to do a review back home of it. So I get no chance. Then maybe I might get, if they do a kick-off press conference, which he does sometimes do, Frank, maybe I'll get to one of them. But unfortunately, I won't be able to attend that one. And the reason why I say unfortunate, because the Magnificent Seven shows, Frank hasn't done a bad one yet. And I think with the way, you see, look at what Frank is doing in the UK and you contrast that to what Eddie Hearn is doing in the UK. Frank Warren, is he putting on some shows where, you look at the show and you think, it's alright, main event is okay, am I really massively invested in the rest of the card? Not necessarily. And you could argue that that's this weekend's card. It has Chantel. I didn't even know Chantel Cameron was fighting until I seen it on BoxRec. Echo Usman versus Ben Vaughn. I'm pretty sure I've seen him fight before, actually, that Ben Vaughn guy. I don't know where. Ezra Taylor. No disrespect to these guys, but I'm not looking at this card that's happening the weekend's happening in Birmingham. I'm not looking at it with the fights that are on it and thinking, I'm keen in that. Whereas Liam Davis versus Shabazz Massoud, that is going to be, I think that's going to be flipping brilliant. I think that's going to be a really, really, really entertaining fight. I think that's going to be absolutely epic. I would favour Liam Davis, I would. But him against Hamza Massoud, I think that's going to be epic. And that is the main event on Frank's show this weekend in Birmingham. Now, contrast that to the Magnificent Seven, and even though there is some fights on there that do look like they could potentially be mismatches, there's still some really, really good fights that you'd look at and say, I want to see that. you know, and it's a brilliant card. And where am I going with this? Eddie Hearn, in terms of the UK shows, I think Eddie Hearn did some UK shows when he was back with Sky, and some were great, some weren't. Before he started bringing in the Next Gen shows, which he brought in midweek in Sky, which I loved. It was a really niche concept to do them. Did them in the York Hall and Brentwood and places like that. He was doing the odd Saturday show that was not great, to say the least, but for the most part it was good quality shows with good quality undercards. That was when he pretty much had British boxing on lockdown. There was no Ben Shalom. Frank Warren was on the Box Nation days, and some of the shows weren't bad. He really improved when he went to BT, and he didn't improve a great deal, but he improved enough that some of his shows got better. But Eddie Hearn was still in the driving seat. You fast forward all these years later, and Eddie Hearn, in terms of his international stable, in terms of fighters UK or US side, Bam Rodriguez, etc., brilliant. And some of those shows over in Mexico, I mean, look at the show we're getting next weekend with Boots and Bam on that show. That's going to be absolutely mega. I can't wait for that show. But when you look at his UK stable, I mean, when he had two pullouts, I was going to say Liam Smith there, but it wasn't Liam Smith. It was Dalton Smith. I was like, Liam Smith? No, Dalton Smith. When Dalton Smith pulled out of his, well, I forget who he was going to fight, but when he pulled out of the Sheffield show, they had to bump up Johnny Fisher. When Johnny Fisher pulled out, Eddie Hearn had to do something, so he did the Rihanna Dixon versus Terry Harper show, and I could not tell you an undercard fight on that show for anything. It just was one of those cards that, in the nicest way to both girls, you were just like, I don't know, I'm not compelled to watch it, you know. And you see some of the other shows, and they've been alright, but there's not been one show this year that could even touch a Magnificent Seven show. I guess that's what I'm getting at. And I say that I haven't even told you who's on it. I'm sure you know, but I'll tell you anyway. You know, some of the guys we have here, which is Sam Noakes. Oh, and Sam Noakes, amongst others, Moses the Town being another one amongst others, as I said, have also signed long-term deals with Queensbury. So a lot of these fighters are happy to stay on board with Frank. He's fighting Ryan Walsh. Now, Ryan Walsh is an upsetter, to say the least. I mean, he knocked out Reese Mould in a round. I think that was on one of those GBM shows. It was last month, September. And he'd been in the wilderness for a couple of years. He'd lost to Maxie Hughes, lost to Jazza Dickens. So that was a real good comeback fight. That was a real good comeback win, and, you know, credit to him. So he's in there against Sam Noakes, who is a big puncher, British Commonwealth champion. Brad Paul's Denzel Bentley, love it. Denzel Bentley lost unexpectedly, really, to Nathan Heaney, who Brad Pauls drew with and then stopped in the 12th round in an epic fight. That was in Birmingham on their Magnificent Seven show back in July. Brad Paul's long overdue, a crack at the middleweight, British middleweight champion, and, you know, Bentley, he wants a world title shot. He needs to get through Brad Paul's. This could be an example of styles make fights, or Bentley turning up this time, because he does do that sometimes, not turn up. Solomon Dakis versus David Adelaye was meant to happen much earlier in the year. I think it might have been, I'm not sure actually, it might have been the Chisora Joyce show, but that's happening now. I fancy Adelaye. I do. I fancy him to win that fight. He should beat Solomon Dakers. I've never really been that impressed with him at all. Lawrence Okoli makes his Queensbury debut. The man who got a big high ranking in the WBC top 10. Who is he fighting? Who is his first fight against? Hassan Mohammed. Don't worry, I never heard of him either. 33 years old, from Germany, 6'5". He boasts a 77% knockout ratio, 18-1 with 14 knockouts. Most noticeable name on there is a no contest with Senad Gashi. No contest due to a WBC violation and BDB anti-drugs rule. God only knows what happened there. And then a third round knockout, and it says here KO, so a clean KO defeat to Zan Kozabutsky. The one thing I will say is that the weight he weighed in the Kozabutsky fight, he was 264 pounds. That was 2 years ago. Now, Okoli should be beating the likes of these guys. He really should, because this guy just, his resume doesn't look terrible, but I can't imagine that he's got to, you know, instill fear in most heavyweights. Certainly not, especially if you're losing to Kozabutsky and going the distance with Senad Gashi. But Okoli's whole thing has been being bigger and stronger. Now, good luck to Lawrence Okoli, because they're both 6'5", so it's not like he's going to be a couple of inches taller. Didn't actually look at the reach there, but I would imagine Okoli may have the longer reach, I don't know. But you try manhandling a 6'5", 260 plus pound man the way you were doing it at cruiserweight, you're in for a rude awakening. Oh boy, are you in for a shock. He is in for a shock. So that is who Lawrence Okolie is making his cruiserweight heavyweight debut against. And for me again, it's just the real. Him at heavyweight, I don't think it's going to work out too well. He could prove me very much wrong. I wouldn't be proven wrong, but I just look at the way he fights, everything, and I just think you're going to struggle, mate. You're going to struggle. Gervonta Davis versus Lamont Roach is not going to happen on December the 14th as originally announced. They are saying Tank will likely be fighting in January instead. Lamont Roach, yeah, we all wanted to see that fight. I'd even take the Pitbull rematch at this point now. Tank Davis, it's just getting ridiculous. Just ridiculous. What else do we have here? Oh, yes. So Ben Shalom announced on Monday morning they were in conversations with Canelo over a potential fight with Chris Eubank Jr. Eddie Reynoso has denied that they are in talks to face Chris Eubank Jr. and insisted the fight will never happen. It's totally false. Eubank had his chance to fight Canelo in September, and the only thing he did was complain, complicate, I should say, the negotiations. We will not touch base with him for a future fight. And I actually tweeted on X about that, and I said, Ben Shalom saying he's been in conversation with Team Canelo is like someone DMing Sky Nicholson. Her never even reading it, and then going and saying, haha, yeah, I'm in conversation with Sky Nicholson, yeah, in the context. I'm sure probably Ben Shalom sent an email and then went and said, yeah, conversations with Canelo, brilliant. How good's that working for you? I've no interest in seeing that fight. And to be honest with you, I don't really know what Canelo's going to be doing next, because Canelo, as fun as he is to watch, his career over the last couple of years has been, stagnant. I don't say stagnant, that's the wrong word, but he's definitely not been looking to fight the cream of the crop every chance he gets like he was in the past. Undisputed at 168 pounds in a year, cleaned the division out. No Dave Benavidez, no Dave Morrell. And, fights Charlo, 2 weight divisions smaller. Fights Berlanga and Munguia, 2 guys who both undefeated. Munguia has still a little bit of potential there, but they're not on a Benavidez. And bear in mind, I know Berlanga's just a big lump in the nicest way. Munguia, I know he's a big unit, but he came up from 154 to 160 to 168. So he's come through the weights. Whereas Benavidez is a natural, like he's been there for years at 168. Now he's at 175. Is he going to go 175, Canelo? What is he going to do? Like, what is there? I'm hearing people saying that he might fight William Skull and just become undisputed again. I mean, maybe that's a better way to sell the fight. Instead of fighting your mandatory, vacate the belt, let him win it, and then win it back off him and turn it into, go from a mandatory fight to a unification. I mean, it's probably a better way to sell it, yeah, from a marketing point of view. Who wants to see a mandatory? Not really. Do you want to see unification? Oh, I'll see that. So yeah, I get that from a marketing point of view, but realistically, what I would say, Canelo is on his way out. I give him another year or so, maybe 2 or 3 more fights. Listen, if the Crawford fight happens next, I could see that being a real cash out fight for both guys. I could see it being a real cash out fight for both guys. So that is that with Canelo. In terms of a past Canelo opponent, as I said in a video I did about Billy Joe Saunders, is looking huge. He's looking big. So I would imagine that a Billy Joe Saunders rematch is particularly unlikely for Canelo at this point. I would imagine. I'd say Billy Joe Saunders in general is particularly unlikely for anybody. And if I was Chris Eubank Jr., I'd be looking at Billy Joe Saunders, the clip of him, and thinking, crap. Because that is a fight that if Billy Joe came back and was in shape, you could sell that. You could actually sell that fight to the British public. They'd pay for it, they'd watch it, because both guys don't like each other, both guys are good talkers, both guys can rile the other guy up, more so Billy Joe riling Eubank up, I would imagine, but that would probably be the only fight that could probably do anything for Billy Joe at this point. And I'm sorry if you can hear the things outside. There's always revving engines outside, I don't know what they'd be doing. But that is the only fight I would imagine that Billy Joe could come back to and make a decent amount of money to. And even then, you would say come back to, he'd have to come back, get himself down to 168, 175. And the only reason why I say 175 is because he looks so overweight there. To come straight back down to 168 would probably kill him. Probably have to do it intravenously. So yeah, Billy Joe looking way out of shape. It's a weird one. Billy Joe is pretty much done. Without the announcement, he's pretty much done. Anthony Joshua won't be taking the Daniel Dubois rematch, which is a good thing in fairness. But what does he do next? Fury and Usyk could have one foot out the door for either guy. We're into a different kind of stage of boxing now. Frank Warren, I mean, if you had said to me, like, this would be the landscape of boxing in 2024, 7-8 years ago, I would have laughed that Frank Warren is the guy in the UK putting these shows on. And, you know, there's a guy called Ben Shalom who thinks, you know, sending an email means you're in deep conversation. And Eddie Hearn lost 5-zip in a 5v5 show against Matchroom Queensbury. I would have said, Jesus Christ, what the F happened? You know? So that is most of the news, and my phone's after dying, so I will take that. My spare phone, I should say, is after dying. So I will take that as a hint to end the review midweek report here. I hope you enjoyed it. I will record some vids for tomorrow, and maybe if I'm not too, I won't be really probably busy tomorrow, but if I'm home early enough, I'll try and get a live in. I haven't done a live since the Baturbia Bivol show, so I'll try and get a live in for that. So I'll leave it there, people. Hope you enjoyed it. Smash the like button, hit subscribe, all that good stuff. Peace.